My friends, welcome to part 5 of the Chris and Alec Benson Leary phone call series. We're getting to that point where Chris is really starting to lose all of his patience. Alec is starting to press Chris on a lot more topics. But to Chris, all that matters is explaining to Alec that yes, cartoon characters can have thoughts and feelings, and yes, cartoon characters are real in a sense. And anyone who thinks that that's not true is naive. These are Chris's words, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to jump right back into this and see where the conversation left off. As I said, where we last left off, Chris is trying to explain to Alec that Asperchu would not want a name like Asperchu. He'd want a different name. And Asperchu would want a lot of these other things if he wasn't under the control of Alec. So we're going to see what Alec's response to that is and how Chris reacts to all this shit. It's just going to be a fun time, guys. So I hope you guys sit back, spark one up, and can enjoy the rest of this call.
As an individual, within his own world, outside of your control, Asperchu would not want that name. He would be in agreement with me and probably want to change his name to something like Mitch.
But the thing there is, Asperchu is not outside my control because it's a comic, and I am the creator and, manager of his comic universe. So
Okay.
as his creator, I decide what Asperchu wants and what he doesn't want and what his personality is like. I mean, don't you think?
Fairly.
You can easily see that Chris just wants to find a reason to be mad at Alec and to not like Asperchu. It's not like Chris doesn't do the same thing in his world, He writes Sonichu, he makes Sonichus all perfect in that he's their creator. But when Alec brings up his stance on it, Chris can only respond with a subtle little, okay. Like, he doesn't want to admit that he does the same shit as Alec, but he just wants to tell Alec that what you do is wrong. And Asperchu, if he had a choice, he wouldn't like anything you're saying that he does right now. Chris is just trying to prove to this guy that cartoon characters have thoughts, feelings, and what you write down on paper, that doesn't mean anything, They have their own thoughts and feelings. You don't control anything, even though Chris controls his own shit all the time.
Have you ever watched the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yes, I have. It was a good movie.
Yeah, you got this whole toon world there. And within that, it would coincide with the comic book world, and every individual comic, published or unpublished, drawn all together. And within that world actually would reside your Asperchu, but he would be with his individual thoughts, and she gave him an adult attitude within his individual thoughts. He would hate having the name of Asperchu because it emphasizes his mental problem or his special condition. And he's like, in his process of wanting to move on from that and become more accessible in society, that he would not want a name that would make him feel
okay,
like
that's
as if he's still living it, even after he's fully recovered from it.
I think Chris is using his past trials and tribulations and even trauma, having to deal with autism, to try to explain why Asperchu wouldn't like his own name. Now, we already brought it up. Chris draws his characters too. He makes whatever he wants them to be, he makes it. But when Alec does it, and Alec makes a character that Chris doesn't agree with, Chris has no time in his day for this, Chris wants that shit nipped in the bud right away because he doesn't want it rubbing off on his Sonichu. And we all know how serious Chris has always been about if there was ever a cure for autism, he'd take it. So that someone who, like a character who has a name that references something that's like a mental disability, Chris already is like, no, not having that. Every character should be all perfect, should never have to deal with that. Because as he said before too, Chris, he likes to mirror someone without a disability, when he finds a significant other, he doesn't want her to be disabled just like him. Chris just wants to be a normal person, which is what anybody wants, It's a completely fair thought. But at the same time, he's using this to try to explain why the name of a cartoon character doesn't work. And at that point, you've just lost me. At that point, it's just kooky bullshit.
Okay, but Chris, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that was still a movie, and everything in it was predetermined by the movie writers and the director. And I mean, there is no, like alternate cartoon world in reality. I mean, cartoon characters don't actually think and feel things.
You don't.
I got it. Okay, here's a question.
You obviously are naive about that because you're not you're not understanding that possibility of that universe actually existing.
The absolute gall of Chris to call somebody else naive for not believing in the Roger Rabbit-esque cartoon world. It's just, Chris, even in the letters nowadays he writes from jail, he's always believed in these alternate dimensions and alternate universes. And to him, it's real likely that out there's a dimension where all the cartoon characters everyone's created exist. And that's where Chris wants to go. That's where Chris wants to live. But he's so sure of this without any proof to back it up that he's willing to bring it up in a conversation like this and just kind of scoff and roll his eyes and call the other person how you're so naive for not believing that there's a possibility that there's another world like this. Like, we all know that Chris is crazy. We all know that Chris is out of his mind. Like, this is something that even in, like I said, these newer jail letters, he's shown in full colors that he's really off the wall with this idea. He thinks that the dimensions are going to merge any minute now, and you're going to be living next to, like, Samurai Jack and whoever else, It's just how this is going to work. Cartoon characters are coming to our world to live here. Because it's just something, once again, just like the Asperchu thing. It's something that Chris either doesn't like or likes. So, because he feels that way, he feels like everyone else has to think that way. So, because Alec isn't going to just toe the line and agree that there's some weird cartoon world out there, Chris is just, like I said, going to roll his eyes and be like, what a naive guy this is. And remember, to Chris, naive is one of the worst things you can call somebody. So he's given Alec the lowest of the low forms of respect here.
So you do believe that when an artist creates a cartoon character, that character actually becomes real? Is that what you're saying to me?
Within that universe, yes.
But the universe is fake. I mean, the Asperchu universe exists on paper and in my computer. It's whatever I write it to be. Oh, here's a question for you. Okay, so if you think a character would want, an appropriate name, a good name, not a name that, calls them out on something or sets them back. Sonichu is the name of a species, correct? I mean, yeah. There's Sonichus and Rosechus. Those are a species, right?
Yeah, but he was the first one. He was the first original Sonichu, and she was the original Rosechu.
But they still want their own name.
And they each came up with their name on their own. They did not need a nickname to go with that.
So Alec brings up a good point that, if you think Asperchu shouldn't have picked his name, well, didn't you pick Sonichu's name? And to Chris, he's got to nip that shit in the bud right away. Be like, oh, no. Chris didn't pick Sonichu's name. Sonichu and Rosechu made up their own names, They got turned into like a Sonic Pikachu form, looked at the sky and said, oh my god, I am Sonichu. And Rosechu did the same thing after getting morphed with Amy Rose and Raichu. They just decided, oh, let's put these two names together. It's perfect. But Alec is about to bring up how, it's kind of weird that you're just calling them Sonichu because all the other Sonichus have, names, Wild Sonichu, Magichan Sonichu, and then there's just Sonichu. So, it doesn't really make sense when one of them's name is basically just person or man or thing, and all the other ones have actual names in front of them. So, Chris is going to try to find a way to explain this away and not going to do too good of a job at it.
Okay, but Chris, if you're a human being, would you be comfortable just being named human or man? I mean, would you be comfortable if the name Christian Weston Chandler didn't exist and you were just called man or person or something? I mean, Homo sapiens. If someone calls you Homo sapiens.
Yes, but still, I was not the very first human being, and I actually had parents who gave me that name. Sonichu came in, he had to come up with his own name.
Sonichu had you that gave him the name, didn't he? I mean, within the comic, Christian Weston Chandler is Sonichu's father, right? I mean, why wouldn't your cartoon self give him a name?
Well, that's the cartoon me versus the real me.
Okay, but isn't the cartoon you Like you said, cartoons are, basically real. I mean, so shouldn't the cartoon version of you be just like you? Wouldn't you want to give your child a name? I mean,
I did give him a name. He's the original Sonichu, so therefore, it's as such.
But all the other Sonichus also have, like nicknames or secondary names. So the first Sonichu, I gotta think, is feeling kind of left out.
No, he doesn't feel left out. He accepts that, and he's happy with it, just as Rosechu.
So Chris is just fumbling all over himself, saying that, Sonichu and Rosechu came up with their names by themselves, but, I gave Sonichu and Rosechu their names in my book. Oh, but, the Kristen Weston Chandler in the comics isn't the same as the person Kristen Weston Chandler. He just has an excuse for fucking everything. It's classic Chris to just sit here and try to make something out of nothing, and he's trying his damnedest, but it's not really working out. And then he'll talk about how, Alec brings up rightfully that Sonichu, as we've already brought up, has a name that all the other Sonichus also have, but they have real names in front of it. Bubbles, Punchy, Wild, all of them have real names. And he says, doesn't Sonichu feel left out? And, maybe Sonichu does in the cartoon world, but Chris is sure enough to say no. No, he does not feel left out. He appreciates it and accepts it. He's not asking if Aspercho appreciates and accepts his name, but Sonichu, it's a real cool name. Of course he loves it, because to Chris, as I brought up before, if it comes from Chris's head and Chris thinks it's cool, that's all that matters. That's all that matters for Sonichu to go, yeah, you know what, I'll just do whatever you want to do, Chris, because you're the author of this book, and you make it so that we do whatever you write. And, it's just how books are written, how stories are told, and that's how, for Chris, it's normal, but for him to see someone else doing it, like Alec, making the characters do things that Chris sees as, unethical and shit like that, absolutely not. This guy needs to be stopped.
Okay, well, I don't think that Asperchu feels left out, because, he's just my cartoon character. He's my property. He's, my intellectual property. That's what he is. You can't have a person as property. So, if he's my property, he's not a person. He doesn't feel things. He doesn't think.
Okay, well, still, what if you actually conceived a child with your girlfriend or wife? Then would you feel that you actually own that child, even after you had raised it from being a baby to, let's say, late teenage years, where that child would actually feel more like an individual, independent being?
Chris, you do understand that a child, a human being, is substantially more than a comic character, right? They're not the same thing. They're not even close.
So that little clip there is a whole lot to unpack, because you can see Chris, he can't understand that, these comic characters, even though it's something that he sees as his genuine kids, he sees as something that he's grown and built his whole life with, he genuinely sees himself as the father of Sonichu. He can't see that these things aren't the same as an actual human child. Now, to him, they may be. To him, he cares about this world so much that it may be as important as, he's realized, maybe not by this point, but definitely now, he's realized that, having a child is it seems like that dream has gone out the window. So his world and his creation and everything he wants to make is in the Sonichu world. But Alec brings up too, it's an absolutely asinine thought to think that, comparing something you draw and how much you care about what you draw, comparing that to an actual human being, a baby, and being like, oh, you wouldn't fuck around with a baby like you did these comic book characters, is just such a wild thought. Because to any normal person, you wouldn't compare a baby to a comic book character. But to Chris, they really are almost on the same thing, All he sees is, well, you created that with your wife, I created this with my pencil, so yeah, same thing, we gotta take care of both of them. Whereas, it's like I said, it's just a crazy thought, but it's from the mind of Chris, so you can't really expect too much from him. But still, every time I hear that, it'll never make me not scratch my head and just be like, what the fuck? If he did end up going through and having Crizel and all that shit, or was his daughter Crizel or Crystal? I'm sorry, Crystal. Crystal Weston Chandler. If he went through and eventually had Crystal, he would have probably drawn a picture of her on paper and been like, look, it's your brothers and sisters and shit, you know? He doesn't... I think he would have genuinely seen his kid on the same level as Sonichu, which is a terrible thought considering that he hasn't written a new Sonichu comic in years, so he would have lost interest in his kid probably real fucking soon. But yeah, that's just Chris's mindset right there.
Of course I would name a child. Children are real, and children are not our property. I mean, if I had a child, I would give it all the love and support it needed, but it is its own person, or he or she, I should say. Whereas a comic character is just, it's whatever you draw on paper or in Photoshop. I mean, when I draw Asperchu on paper, that's the only place he exists. And then I upload him onto my computer, and that's where he exists. And then he exists on the web. So as a character, he grows, but he's never a person.
Well, anyway, it's just something for you to think about. Okay, yeah.
We can agree to disagree.
What if it was left she was on the other foot? What if Asperchu created you?
Well, then I'd be a comic character myself, and I wouldn't have any thoughts or feelings. So that's a moot point.
You think that comic character would not have their own thoughts and feelings?
No.
Are naive.
Chris, you have told me that you think that a comic character is fundamentally as much of a person as a real human being. That is the naive thought.
Oh, yeah.
I'm the writer. I'm like the god of the Asperchu world. I decide what goes on in Asperchu's world. I decide who and what Asperchu is and what he thinks and feels, if anything, which he doesn't, because it's still just a character on paper. And when I put the pen down, Asperchu stops being there.
Chris is literally grasping at any straw he can to try to make his argument valid. Him saying, well, what if Asperchu drew you? Like, he's looking literally for any type of thing he can think of for this guy to go, yeah, you know what, you're right. I did give him a name that doesn't make him sound awesome and cool, like Sonichu. So let me go ahead and change his name to Mitch. But it's this, like I said, these little clips, it shows so much about Chris's mental state, because Alec is bringing up that that's such a naive thought, to think that these characters have real thoughts and feelings and all this, and all Chris can respond with, and it gets muffled over Alec talking too, but you can hear Chris going like, no, you're the naive one for thinking that that's not the case. Alec is trying to prove to Chris that, when he draws Asperchu is there. He's on the paper and that's that. But when he puts the pencil down, Asperchu is still there on the paper. He's not living a real life. He's not doing all of this, world-saving bullshit like the Sonichus do for Chris. But Chris just can't comprehend that. In Chris's mind, the second he puts down that paper, those characters jump out. And they're right here living alongside us like just any normal people. And like I said, it's a very naive thought, but Chris thinks everyone else is naive for not seeing it his way, He's much more willing to just think everyone else is bullshitting than to look at himself and go, man, maybe I'm wrong. But it's Chris. He's physically incapable of finding himself wrong.
I mean, nothing exists in Asperchu's world that I haven't drawn. It's naive to think that there's anything more. I think we should agree to disagree on this point, because we both have our own thoughts on it. I kind of want to ask you about, I'm actually getting some letters about Sonichu, about why you're not updating daily, and I was kind of curious about that.
But for your information, I am updating daily. I draw and color my 2 pages a day. I can't help it if I don't have access to my computer, or if I can't get to it right away. Besides which, my biological clock has been fickle on me. It's been making me fall asleep earlier.
Chris is quick to tell Alec that no, he is updating daily. He's always got his new Sonichu pages out. But then he goes on to give a bunch of excuses as to why that wouldn't be the case. He can't get to his computer. His computer's out. His biological clock is making him not be able to sleep right. Chris, even at this time, was very on and off with the Sonichu shit. One day he'd have it, one day he wouldn't. And Alec was someone who kept putting out art like every day. And as we'll see as this goes on, Alec starts drawing his own version of Sonichu. which Chris is absolutely not having at all. But it's just, Chris would never have anyone drawing the Sonichu shit. He would hate it. That's why the whole thing going on with Kangol and all them right now while Chris is in jail. If Chris finds out that people are going to be drawing Sonichu without his consent, he's going to lose his mind. But then, all this stems from Alec saying, let's just agree to disagree, because obviously we're not getting anywhere here. And all Chris is doing is kind of mumbling under his breath going, boy, you're like, I think he says, boy, you're naive again, just because he can't wrap his head around the fact that this guy doesn't agree that there's a real cartoon world out there. To Chris, that's just, for any normal person, it's crazy to think of someone who does believe in that. But for Chris, it's crazy to think of someone who doesn't believe in that.
Okay, well, I understand.
It's been difficult to rearrange my schedule and get back in a synchronized routine like I would be.
Maybe we could get an alarm clock. I'm just kind of curious. Like, I know it takes like an hour to do each page. Is that about what you spend? I would kind of guess. I'm just kind of confused why I would spend an hour to draw a page, but not take the extra 60 seconds to upload it. I think consistency is an important thing.
But wait a minute, it takes more than 60 seconds to scan it and fix it in Photoshop, then upload it. It probably would take half an hour for all that to work.
I didn't know that you did Photoshop work with your pages. What do you use Photoshop for, if I may ask? I'm just kind of curious. I thought
change it from handwritten text to more legible typed text.
If I remember right, I think kind of one of the criticisms you had about Aspertune was that it was not completely, hand-drawn original, because I do use Photoshop in part of my creative process. But it sounds like you actually do kind of the same thing.
It's a common theme in this call, something that keeps on recurring, is Chris being mad at Alec for something that he does himself. He says here, and he's said all throughout the call and said before in different mailbags, and when talking about Alec around this time, Chris would always use the fact that, his stuff isn't originally hand-drawn, so therefore it looks much worse than Chris's and all that. To him, it was just a hindrance. It was something that Alec was lacking at. Because anything that Alec was doing that Chris wasn't doing and Chris didn't agree with was just a big negative on Alec's part. But here, Chris admits that he does basically the same thing that Alec does, puts his stuff through a photocopier to make it look better. So once again, Chris is caught being a hypocrite, but he's gonna try to explain himself again.
Which is that's fine. I mean, digital media is where the art world is going. But I thought that you drew it all on paper and then uploaded it.
Well, for your information, I did draw it all on paper. The only part that I edit in Photoshop is the text, what you read.
Okay, but it just seems a little hypocritical that you do use Photoshop in the creative process, but you criticize me for it. I mean, don't you think?
No, actually, what I thought is that you skip the hand drawing and you draw everything on your Photoshop with the computer mouse.
Well, I don't. Here's what I do. I do sometimes draw the pages on paper. I'm kind of trying to shy away from that because, our society wastes so much paper. So I'm trying to be a little, socially responsible.
Something that's always funny when the trolls do it is act like they're so much of better people than Chris. Alec is bringing up that he's trying to, there's too much paper used in the world. So I'm trying to cut down on using paper to help out the world a little bit. Where it's like, bullshit. Like, what you're saying is true, but don't act like you didn't go to McDonald's and use as many napkins as you fucking damn well pleased. Like, they always try to act like they're so morally superior to Chris. A good example of this is in the Casey calls, Chris would bring up something like having a glass of lemonade, and she'd be like, Chris, don't you realize how much sugar is in that? Like, don't you realize how terrible that is for you? Well, once again, it's true, there is a lot of sugar in it, but don't be sitting here acting like Chris is some crazy madman for having a glass of lemonade. Like, it's just, I don't know. The trolls always try to put up this act that they're so much better, they know so much better than Chris, and most of them do. But at the same time, it's just you always pick the littlest things to be like, "Wow, Chris, you're not doing this. That's so unethical of you."
I do. I use a tablet and I draw on that, and that's basically the same thing as pen and paper, except what I draw just goes right onto the computer screen. So I don't use a mouse. Yeah, it's the same.
Okay, but still, it's crappy compared to mine. Even my mother agrees.
Oh, hey,
on that.
hey, come on. That's a little insulting, Chris. What do you mean crappy? I mean, my mother says that my comic is, the most beautiful comic she's ever seen too, but I kind of think that's just because she's a supportive mother. Mothers are supposed to support their children in their endeavors.
And when all else fails, pull the mom and dad card. I can't believe he did that. After realizing that he had nowhere to run, nowhere to explain away, nowhere to kind of nothing to explain why he was being hypocritical, he jumps to, well, it looks crappy, and even my mom agrees that yours looks crappy compared to mine. By the way, this is a man who was pushing 30 years old at the time. And it's just, one of Chris's excuses was, there's no smudge marks on the paper, there's all different reasons why Chris's hand-drawn shit is so much better than Alec's. But the real reason at the end of the day is because, Barb Chandler looked at it, the art expert, the art connoisseur, Barb Chandler, looked at it and decided, no, Chris, yours is far more superior and far more fancy than that Alec's. And it's just, it's just so fun. Like I said, it's such an immature thing for Chris to do, but, when all else fails, tell mom. It's crazy how far we've come though, back when Chris was valuing Barb's opinion on his art and all, mostly because it made him look better to the other people he was trying to impress and trying to one-up. But now he just wants Barb to kick the bucket and get out of there, because in the situation he's at now, Chris thinks because of what he did to his mom, if she kicks the bucket, he'll be let out of jail, because why would he need to be in jail anymore? Because the person he did the shit to is, she's not around no more. So that's Chris's that's the mindset he's in right now. Him and his mom aren't on the best of terms. Not in the best of terms at all. But, that's what's going on now. This call, though, is from years ago, and I've been enjoying every second of it, and I hope you guys have been enjoying it, too, because we're going to have tons of more parts of this week, so I hope you're all ready for it. I want to give shouts out to Vanessa, Krabby, your mom, Cody Hale, Club Doom, the Ghostbusters fan, Sky, Echo Spectre, Scaly Schisms, Worman Bjornson, Mick Surly, Akiba's Beat fan, Kaitan, the Night Owl, Churlish, Isaiah, Music Biz Marty's Bong, Pythea, and our good old friend Fiendland's Party Place. You guys are all goats, and all of you who've made it to the end of this video, you are a goat as well, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Now, like I said, I'll have plenty more of these out this week. We're going to be churning them out mostly every day, so I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope you hear from more. And we're going to be looking at a lot more of Chris's old antics as well. With the Quickie being down, I think it's a good time to kind of talk about some of the articles that the Quickie may be, some of the articles on the Quickie. I don't want to do Quickie readings. I've never wanted to. I don't find it fun to just read the Quickie articles. I like talking about it from my own, like right off the dome. So we'll talk about maybe Chris and how his hypocrisy works, Chris and just how greedy he is, stuff like that. We're going to talk about old troll sagas. We may even rank some of the best trolls and all that. There's so much here to talk about with Chris, so we got tons to get into. And other locales like Cyrax and Ethan Ralph and Wings, we're going to be getting back into them too. And a lot of people you guys have wanted me to talk about down in the comments. Don't think I'm missing them. We're going to be getting some new cows too. So I hope you guys stick around and enjoy it, and until the next one, take care and stay safe, y'all. The weekend's coming up soon, and you're going to be sitting back, kicking back, not having to worry about a thing, and that's the way life's supposed to be, have a carefree, good time, and that's all that matters, my friends. So again, I'm about to get out of here, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Until then, take care and be safe, my friends.